Well, good evening and welcome to this very special event. My name is Ted Purcell. I'm Baptist Campus Minister here at Duke University. And on behalf of the sponsoring groups for tonight, I welcome you. Those groups include the Baptist Student Union, Duke University Chapel, the Keenan Institute for Ethics, and the Self-Knowledge Symposium. The two student organizations sponsoring this event will have representatives in the lobby. If you should be interested in learning more about them, getting some information in print, or talking to persons there. It's my privilege to introduce our speaker, Jasmine French, who is Vice President for Student Affairs in Duke Student Government and also the President of the Baptist Student Union. Jasmine French.
Good evening. It is indeed my pleasure to introduce tonight's distinguished speaker. Dr. Smith is currently Thomas J. Watson Professor of Religion and Distinguished Adjunct Professor of Philosophy Emeritus at Syracuse University. For 15 years, he was Professor of Philosophy at MIT, and for a decade prior, he taught at Washington University, St. Louis. Most recently, he has served as Visiting Professor of Religious Studies, University of California. His books include The World's Religions, The Illustrated World's Religions, Forgotten Truth, Beyond the Postmodern Mind, and One Nation Under God, The Triumph of the Native American Church. A forthcoming book, Why Religion Matters, The Future of Faith in an Age of Disbelief, is scheduled for publication in January 2001. The Journal of Ethnomusicology lauded his discovery of Tibetan multiphonic chanting as an important landmark in the study of music, and his film documentaries on Hinduism, Tibetan Buddhism, and Sufism have all won international awards. Born of missionary parents in Suzhou, Dr. Smith lived in China until the age of 17. There, his youth provided an appropriate background for his subsequent interests in comparative philosophies and religions. Interest in education beyond the classroom led Professor Smith to produce 3 series for the public broadcasting system while it was still national educational television: The Religions of Man, The Search for America, and with Arthur Compton, Science and Human Responsibility. In 1996, Bill Moyers devoted a 5-part PBS special entitled The Wisdom of Faith with Huston Smith to his life and work. This series was nominated for a 1997 Emmy Award. In fact, Bill Moyers is quoted as saying, "America's religious landscape is changing before our eyes, and no one has done more to prepare us for the new religious reality than Huston Smith." Dr. Smith is the father of 3 daughters. His wife, Dr. E. Kendra Smith, is a psychologist, and they live together in Berkeley, California. With tonight's topic being Why Religion Matters, The Future of Faith in an Age of Disbelief, it is indeed my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Huston Smith.
Business before pleasure. The one empirical discovery of my career is that I was the first Westerner to come upon an extraordinary mode of chanting, which has created a new word in the lexicology of musicology, namely multiphonic chanting, the capacity of one voice to sing multiple tones simultaneously, a discovery and technique developed by certain specially trained Tibetan lamas. This bound me karmically to the Tibetans in this time of their great ordeal, and I brought out a disc on this phenomenon, and which I turned into a more portable cassette tape, and I carry a few of these around with me wherever I go, and I will leave them up here on the platform. I get these tapes dubbed for $2. I pass them on for a $10 donation to Tibetan Relief. If you should pick one up, be sure to take a copy of the explanatory flyer that goes with the tape, Can One Voice Sing a Chord? Now, a word about my title. It's natural that I would want to talk with you about what's most on my mind, and that is what I have put into my next book, which I completed reading proofs on just last week. It will be published the 1st of January. And the working title, while I was writing that book, was The Human Spirit in the Third Millennium, Light at the End of the Tunnel. And at the end, the publishers threw me a curve, not exactly. I agreed with their article, their argument, and they changed it to, and the title of the book will be Why Religion Matters. And that's equally apt for the content of the book. And so I proposed that when I was asked for the title of this lecture. However, that would be less schematic to explain. And therefore, I'm going to go back to the working title that guided me as I was writing it, The Human Spirit in the Third Millennium, which is, as you will find out, more easily presented schematically. So without further ado, I will plunge right in. Especially the subtitle, Light at the End of the Tunnel. I will use, I trust, not more than half of my time to describe the tunnel that modernity has forced the human spirit into, and then I'll try to save more than half of my time to the issue of whether we are emerging towards the light at the end of that tunnel. But first, the tunnel itself. In the great out of doors in which the human spirit lived before modernity shunted it into this tunnel, it was in, as Max Weber said, a kind of enchanted garden. And the crux of that traditional outlook, religious, because all traditions have been religious, was that this everyday world that we experience is not the whole story. There is another world that is greater than this one and better than this one and exerts final control over this one. Now that parallels exactly the scientific claim or discovery. Now it's been clearly demonstrated that there is another world to what science shows us, namely the quantum world. It's very different from our common sense world. In fact, it's impossible to map it exactly onto our sense world but it's there and it has the power it calls the tune. The difference between the other worlds in science and religion is that the other world of science can be described only mathematically in terms of numbers, whereas the other world for religion is qualitative. It is better. And for our Western tradition, I will not take time to give examples in India and China, but they're there, is for philosophy, Plato's allegory of the cave, according to which our everyday world is but like shadows on the cave in comparison with the sunlight outside the cave and the sun from which that light streams. In the religious version, the allegory, the paradigm, is Moses' climactic experience on Mount Sinai, seeing the mountain in flame and the voice of Yahweh. So in the traditional view, this world is only a part of a greater world, which I will simply call transcendence, but think of it with a capital T, because all the religions view that other world as from which this world has been created or emanated, as that world as the more important. Now, a few years ago, the Chronicle of Higher Education, in one of its issues, had a very arresting statement. It said, if anything characterizes modernity, it is the loss of transcendence. And then it goes on to say, the loss of an order that encompasses and surpasses our everyday affair. Remember the word, if anything characterizes modernity. And I think that report is right. In our public life, in our private beliefs, while we may take exception, but in our public life, why that sense of another greater, higher world has been lost. And that is because modernity was ushered in by the discovery of modern science, a new method of knowing, which created a worldview, we call it the scientific worldview, which in our public life has retired the traditional worldview. And the scientific worldview is an inferior worldview to the traditional one in terms of richness. I will give a few contrasts. In the traditional worldview, human beings and indeed all life is at home because it is made of the same stuff of which the world is made, because the world as a whole is spiritual throughout. So we as human spirit are of the same stuff, the same kind as our largest environment. In the scientific worldview, Spirit is not original and the source of everything, but rather dead matter is the encompassing reality. 15 billion light years of dead matter with consciousness or sentience, which is as close as science ever comes to spirit, no more than, at current estimates, 240 million years old as over against 15 billion years of dead matter. And of course, spatially, in the scientific view, spirit or consciousness or sentience appears, as far as we know, on only one tiny speck in this sidereal space of dead matter, namely on our planet, and on our planet only in the rivulets of life which are on our planet. And so it's obvious that the human spirit does not feel as much at home in the scientific worldview as in the traditional worldview. I will mention only one other contrast. In the traditional worldview shared by all the great religions, which it has been my good fortune to be able to pour my research life into, in that traditional worldview, it is dominated or formatted, might be the best word, by the most successful plot device the human mind has ever conceived, and maybe that is conceivable, namely the plot of a happy ending that blossoms as a result of tremendous ordeals that are faced up to and mastered. They all have that as their, you might say, the plot device. In the scientific world, there is no happy ending. For individuals, death is final, the grim reaper, and if we take the cosmos as a whole, why we have these options, which scientists waver between. The end will be either a fry or a freeze. It will either just sort of go up in flames or down in entropy into 4 degrees above absolute zero. Or else, if the universe continues to expand, it will just keep churning out more and more insentient matter. All right. Now, the human spirit has been shunted unwittingly. Nobody was doing this intentionally. No malice was involved. And the scientists, especially, I want to exonerate from having pushed us in the tunnel. It is just that that scientific method was so dazzling in terms of its achievements on 2 fronts, through technology, the goods it could shower us from television to microwaves and so on, to the noetic awesomeness of the view of the world in its quantitative aspects, so magisterial on that front that we overlook the fact that the scientific method, which gave us those blessings, is at the same time a very limited method, and I will confine myself to only two of its limitations. It cannot deal with values, and second, it cannot show us anything that is greater than we are. By greater, I don't mean bigger, nor more brute power, but anything that is greater in the sense of superior to us by all the virtues that we recognize. Let's just limit ourselves to intelligence. Because, and this is what has slipped our notice, the scientific method is centered in the controlled experiment. That's what makes the difference and makes modern science surpass traditional science, which just based on careful observation. But now, think of this. We can only control what is inferior to us. That means science can show us only things that are less, qualitatively speaking, than we are. Just ask yourself, have you ever, in any science textbook you have ever read, or any science class, been told of anything superior to ourselves? I'm restricting myself to intelligence, more intelligence than we are, but I could add more compassionate than we are. No, because that flashlight is only turned downward toward what we can control. Now, of course, that doesn't prove that there is anything upward greater than we are, angels or God or whatever, but it does prove in a knockdown way that if there are such things, the scientific method will not discover them. I sometimes lapse into a little satire on this point. I feel so passionately about it, and say to look to science to tell us if there's anything greater than we are is like dogs getting together to try to decide whether there's such a thing as mathematics. We've heard that there is such a thing as mathematics. Well, let's just settle the issue. Let's apply the sniff test to that question. And of course the rest follows by itself. Now, because we have slipped, not through malice, but through a little slip in logic into thinking that science can give us the big picture, why, that big picture turns out to be a tunnel which is no home for the human spirit. And very quickly, I'm going to characterize the four sides of this tunnel before I go to the question of the light at the end of it. The floor of the tunnel is scientism. Now note, not science, but scientism. What's the difference? Science consists of the methods and the scientific method and what has been discovered. Awesome nature of this physical world by that method. Scientism goes on beyond that to add two correlates that are not backed by science at all, but goes on to say that the scientific method is the only reliable, or if not the only reliable, the most reliable method of getting at truth. And second, that the things that science can get its instruments onto, namely matter, is the most fundamental thing in reality. And when we get to consciousness and so on, it's the technical word is epiphenomenal, namely it sort of piggybacks on the material organism but cannot exist and is generated by the physical organism but cannot exist without it. Now those two corollaries are not backed by anything in science. They are at best philosophical positions and at worst mere opinion. But as I say, because science has ravished our understanding and our allegiance because of its miracles that it's performed in technology, why we have made that logical slip from science to scientism. And our culture is just riven by the attitudes of scientism. Now I'm going to turn to this wall on this side, and this is higher education. The best book on describing this wall of the tunnel is George Marsden's book, The Soul of the American University, in which by an eminent historian at Notre Dame who points out that higher education in America was founded to train ministers, and so Protestant ministers, so it was natural that the ethos, the atmosphere of the colleges first and then the university tended to be a kind of Protestant atmosphere. And then he traces how in 200 years that has shifted to an ethos of what he calls non-belief, because his argument is, and I won't take the time, of course, to work out the details, is that the ethos or atmosphere in the present university is non-belief or skepticism towards every kind of truth except the truth that science provides for us. The chief instruments of this non-belief are two: the hermeneutics of suspicion and deconstructionism, but those are technical things I'm not going to get into. I'll just conclude this wall with Robert Bellah, one of our two best sociologists of religion, who says the greatest indictment of the contemporary university is that it erodes not just religious belief, which it does, but all belief except belief in science. Now, I want to move to the top, the roof of the tunnel, which is the media. The colleges, universities puts the finishing touches on the minds that go out to rule America. The other finest sociologist of religion is Peter Berger, and he's put this in a kind of a quip, but has devastating truth to it. He says if India is the most religious country on our planet and Sweden is the least religious, America is a land of Indians ruled by Swedes. And that's very telling. That's very accurate because Christopher Lasch wrote a whole book on this, The Revolt of the Elite. It's the knowledge classes that carry over into society the skepticism towards religion in public life, whereas the less educated tend still to be religious in their outlook and belief. And of course, a lot of the problem and turmoil between liberal and fundamentalist Christian comes from this fact. I want to just cite one example that is the most telling. In my city, my home of Berkeley, last week, there began a rerun of the play Inherit the Wind, which was made, of course, from a play into a box office smash hit of a movie. And the director who was mounting this revival of the play says this is a play every American should see time and again, every 3 years, because the issues of evolution and creation are still with us. Well, indeed they are. But what she did not mention is that that play flipped reality as if it were a pancake, and yet it had such impact that if you ask the average American what went on in the Scopes trial of 1925, the living room answer you would get would be the answer of what the play presented. But a prize-winning book in history has been published 3 years ago. Summer of the Gods, Larson was the author, prize-winning Harvard University Press, which goes and documents the way in which the play took that incident and turned it blatantly distorting the facts right and left into a science versus religion ideological play, with science cast in the guise of a knight in shining armor, forward-looking, and religion in that play cast in the worst possible light. It is shown always, and there's stage directions in the side of the script of the play, saying it is important to this play that the town of Dayton be always visible in the background, and the town is presented as bigoted, dogmatic, fundamentalist, which right there, William Jennings Bryan was not a fundamentalist. He said in his testimony that he read the 6 days of creation allegorically, but the play just turns that around and makes him a fundamentalist. And they're mean-spirited, so I mustn't spend longer. I'm using this as my example, my case study of the way the media puts us, human spirit, into a tunnel, in this case by characterizing it in its worst possible guise. We get much of the echo in the way the media, television, and paper characterize ethnic conflicts, but I don't have time to add to that. I must go on to the right side because I'm really interested in the light. The right side is the law, and there my case study. By the way, the book there is Stephen Carter's Culture of Disbelief, a lawyer at Yale University who documents the way the law has encroached more and more to marginalize religion from our public culture. My case study here is one that I happen to be involved with personally. It is the 1990 Supreme Court decision, Smith versus, Employment Division of Oregon versus Smith, in which it stripped the Native American church of its religious right because the sacrament in that church is peyote, which is scheduled as #1 drug, right up there with crack and cocaine and heroin. The facts of the case are that peyote is a harmless cactus to which it is impossible to become addicted and to which not a single misdemeanor has ever been traced. When we compare that with alcohol and addiction, and the 30% of the cases that turn up in emergency room in hospitals being alcohol related, the situation is surrealistic. But because alcohol is our sacrament, that's quite all right. But because peyote is their sacrament, it is not. Fortunately, well, I'll just say, I got involved with this because one of my students went on and became a Native American lawyer, and when this decision was delivered by the Supreme Court, he called me on the phone and the next day and said, "Do you want to get involved?" And I said, "I do." And some of us know if you say those two words, consequences follow. And for me, the consequences were two of the most exciting and rewarding years of my life. And I took leave of my teaching and poured my energy into helping them The judiciary having deserted them, they did an end run around it to the legislature, and with the help of Daniel Inouye, head of the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, they secured the passage of a law by Congress that restored their native sacrament and their constitutional religious rights to them. That's the tunnel that for 300 years we have been moving through. And it has been nothing less than a cage for the human spirit, and it's unnecessary, but I won't go into that. We just haven't thought these things through clearly. But now I want to turn to my second half after glancing at my watch, and ask have we passed the halfway mark? And is the light at the end of the tunnel enlarging? This involves prediction, and crystal balls are always misty, and the future is unpredictable. So all I can register, and I'm unable to factor out how much what I say is powered by evidence and how much by hope. But what I want to do in the remainder of my talk is to target about 5 things that show signs for hope. The first one is what I call the fairness revolution. That is to say, the rights of minorities, be they ethnic, be they gender, in the sense of women who have not had a fraction of the power that would make them equal with men, how these are being addressed more seriously than ever in human history. We are so far from where we need to be that it's premature to congratulate ourselves, and yet changes are occurring. The civil rights movement accomplished its basic objectives, not, well, I won't keep saying, we've got a long way to go, but in terms of the law, equality of the law, and so on. Another example, personal one, in the 1930s, if a streetcar came to a stop and only Chinese Americans were there waiting to board, no Anglos, Caucasian, routinely the streetcars would just pass them by. When I retired from the University of California, Berkeley, its chancellor, very highly respected, was a Chinese American who spoke English with a decided accent. Well, that's in one lifetime considerable change. Colonialism, needless to say, has collapsed, but I won't go on. I think we are working harder. That's all I will say. No, I will say we see what needs to be done more clearly, and we're working harder on the problem than ever in the past. That's my first hopeful sign. The second is that we're coming to a nobler view of who we human beings are. Now, what I'm referring to here is that in our collective culture, of course, the religions have the noblest view of all when they say that we are, in our essence, the imago Dei, the image of God, is the fundamental element in us. And in our public life, why, we're not up to that yet, but we are reconsidering what has been in this century our dominant view of human nature, which has been Freudian. Now, for Freud, the two basic human drives are sex and aggression. Not very lofty foundations for the human self, but through our century, this is what in our public life in modernity we've been taught. This is being seriously challenged now, not only by views of human nature coming in from India and the like, but I'm talking about Western psychology, and specifically I'm talking about a revolution in the understanding of the human self, which was initiated by a man who is very little known. His name is Ion Suttie, S-U-T-T-I-E. Almost nobody knows the name, but he died prematurely, and his unfinished book, The Origins of Love and Hate, has been taken up by his student, John Bowlby, whose name is known in child psychology. And Suttie's conviction, stemming from hours and days and years examining, watching infants developing, became convinced that Freud was wrong. The basic outreach in the infant is for communion. He would watch for hours and he would report. The first response of the infant, looking up at its mother's eye, is an adoring gaze. That's its overture. And when the mother returns that adoring gaze, the infant is likely to drop the nipple and gurgle and smile around the nipple. And when the mother is delighted by that response, then she in turn smiles more broad. It's as Suttie said, it's a mode of flirtation. And that, he thinks, is the fundamental drive, the outreach for bonding in a communion of love. I will insert this little anecdote. We have a 6-year-old granddaughter in San Jose, and the last time, I couldn't go that time, but my wife went down to spend the day with him. When they reached the playground, there were 2 children already there, a girl of about 8 and a boy, presumably her brother, about 5. And as is the way with children, with the briefest of preliminary, the girl asked Kendra, all right, what are we? Kendra squinted a bit and said, I don't know, Vietnamese? No, what are we? And Kendra gave another guess, Korean. And this time the irritation really exploded. No, what are we? At that point, Kendra thought that if she knew what the question was, she might do better with an answer. So she gave up and said, well, I give up. I don't know. What are you? And the girl said, we are brother and sister, and so we love each other. And our grandmother tells us that if we love her, then when we become grandparents, our grandchildren will love us. Well, out of the mouth of babes, in our somewhat cynical, individualistic culture, it may take a child, and maybe one with ties to a traditional culture of Asia, to come out first with the right question. Not who are we, which points towards differences, but what are we? What is our essence? And her answer was equally on the mark. Our essence is relationship. We are brother and sister, and the heart of that relationship is love. As I say, with Ian Satie and Bowlby, I think that traditional view of the human self is outdistancing the Freudian view, much less edifying, which is under increasing attack every year. The third area where I see hope is physics. Science, or not science, but the misreading of science in scientism is what got us into the tunnel to begin with. And if science itself moves out of the tunnel into a more generous view of things, why, of course, we are going to follow it out. And in physics, I'm talking about one point. There are others, but this, I'm limiting myself to the most important one. I'm quoting Henry Stapp, a colleague of Jeffrey Chew's, two world-class physicists at the University of California. And I want to simply target what I'm thinking about with one sentence which I consider so important that I've committed it to memory. It runs like this: everything we now know in physics is in accord with the notion that, now watch these next three words, the fundamental process of nature, and by that, those words mean what it is that really runs this whole show of the physical world is outside space, time, and matter. Now, that is astounding, because the corollary that follows from it, that space, time, and matter, the matrices of our everyday world, are not ultimate, that they are derivative and come from something which is outside those matrices and not subject to them. Now, please don't go out and say that Professor Smith told us that physics has discovered God. I'm not saying any such thing. Science cannot deal with the concept of God. But what it is saying is that there is something, let's just call it an X, that is outside of these matrices, stands apart from them, and from which the matrices and their content derive. That's what the great religions have been saying all along. And even though science can, at this point, can tell us nothing more about what that X is, nevertheless, we now have the first really level playing field for conversation between physicists and theologians, because both agree that the material world is not final and ultimate. The next one I will target is cognitive science. And here my single example has to do with those who are at the cutting edge of cognitive science. I'm thinking about people like Steven Pinker, who heads the cognitive science program at MIT, and Colin McGinn, who has written a wonderful book on consciousness called The Mysterious Flame. And here is what that school of thought is saying. They begin with Descartes, who split the world into mind and matter, a sharp dichotomy. In terms of human consciousness, well, this means we have subjective experiences, feelings, and thought, and then we have brains. Now, the first premise that they accept, the school at the growing tip of cognitive science, is we have two things, and there's no way we can reduce either mind to brain, neuron firing, subjective experience to neuron firing, or brain to mind. We've got these two things. The other thing that is absolutely clear is that there is a two-way interaction between these two things. Those 2 points are indubitable. But now comes the next one, which is that in 300 years since Descartes, we have not moved one hair's breadth to increase our understanding what the relationship between the two are. How is it that the brain, a handful of gray matter, which objectively looks very much like the liver, but how can the brain generate experience and thought? We have not moved one bit closer in 300 years, and now comes the surprise. They deliver it. That may be exactly where it will remain, that ignorance. because they go on to say, what do we think we are? Omniscient? Every decade we're learning about how much more interrelated and mysterious things are, the world is, and we may, in this matter, simply have bumped into a problem that is too big for it. Now, this is a very different word in kind from what we have been hearing from science, which usually is give us the time and give us the money and we'll deliver the answer. But they are saying, following up this line of thought, every species has innate to itself certain fantastic capabilities and certain limitations. Birds have a talent for building nests that construction engineers couldn't emulate if they gave their whole lives to it. Ants, building their colonies, have a capacity to integrate what they do with thousands of other ants and somehow intuitively know where their contribution should go, which beggar the talents of human task force. What about us? We have, they say, two things that we, our species, is obviously good at. The first is language, where we outstrip every other species. And the second is science. Human beings are good at language, and we're good at science. I myself add a third one. They don't. But what is there to keep us, especially somebody like myself, who has given 45 years to the study, from proposing that human beings are good at discerning the essential outlines of the world view. Good by virtue of the nobility of what they have come up with, and good because independently, for the most part, they have converged on the same conclusion. I was going to add one last one, and I guess I will, but very briefly. This is, those are, I think, encouraging signs for the human spirit. They point towards the light at the end, and I think we'll move through them towards that light. There is one discouraging fact at the moment. I think it will be cleared up, and it could be within a couple of decades. But right now, unlike these other sciences, biology is stuck on a siding and is not moving towards the light. The problem here is that Darwinism has moved, and I'm not charging biologists, I'm just charging our culture. We have moved it from a science into a battle between worldviews. One worldview holding that Darwin discovered a way to account for human origin without God. And therefore, in many minds, secular minds, having removed the necessity of God from a worldview. The other side, which is populated by professional biologists of equal caliber, hold the opposite, namely that certainly as things stand now, the evidence that we have is not sufficient to rule out the possibility that God had a part in the process. This is a furious philosophical war that is going on today, and it has, alas, rather ugly features, and one of it is to polarize the whole situation between extremes, saying that there are only two, or talking as if there were only two possibilities, namely six-day creationism on the one hand, and naturalistic mechanical processes which involve no supervision that can produce the human cell, polarized between those two extremes, whereas the broad middle way, which would hold that, yes, the fossil record shows that it took about 250 million years for life, beginning with its simplest form, to evolve into human beings, affirming that and giving that, you might say, to the scientist, but saying that what we know about the two mechanical forces of lawful behavior, which simply is repetitive, and chance, which produces chance mutation, tells us part of how the process works, but is a long, long way from having the whole story, and it remains to be seen what biology will come up with in filling the gaps. I had a small part in this. I was able to persuade the National Association of Biology Teachers to remove two words from what was in their definition of evolution up until 3 years ago. The definition up until then read, evolution is an unsupervised, impersonal process which through, and then natural selection on chance, where you can fill in the rest. And I wrote to the board and said, have you found any facts which shows that the process is impersonal and unsupervised? And after debating the issue for 4 days, at first their first vote rejected my request. Of course I added, because these are two very incendiary words. And if you don't have hard facts, why, it would relieve the tension of our time if you just delete those two. And after 4 days, they brought my letter back on the table, and this time voted unanimously to delete those words. So those words are gone. but flushed with my success, I tried another round. I said, what would you think of recommending to the teachers, scientists who teach evolution, that at the beginning of the first class, they distribute a little sheet of paper which would read something like this. This is a course in science, and as a scientist, I, your teacher, will tell you what we scientists have discovered about how human beings got here. However, there is so much that we still do not know about that process, and there I had an asterisk to a footnote with a quotation from Stephen Jay Gould, one of their own number, saying there is so much we still don't know that, continuing with my statement, there remains plenty of room for you to fill in the gap with your own personal philosophies or religious beliefs. The director of NABT, National Association of Biology Teachers, acknowledged the receipt of my letter, but added in his letter, I don't think you are going to win this one. And I did not, but I still remain totally baffled. What would it do against science to say something like that, which is simply the truth, as stated by Stephen Jay Gould? How would it impede or hurt science in the lead? Meanwhile, it has a major chance of at least easing the tension that is causing so much mischief in our public life. I'm going to skip my conclusion. I've said what I wanted to say. Thank you for your kind attention, and my understanding is that we're going to have an
Dr. Smith, for enlarging and expanding our minds and hearts and spirits. We have 14 minutes left for brief questions. Dr. Smith has graciously agreed to extend our time until 9:30. We'd invite those of you that have questions to come up either to one of the two microphones that are at the front here and respond to Dr. Smith with very brief and succinct questions. The reason we have these mics here is because the talk tonight has been videotaped and will be available to you on the Keenan Ethics Institute website in 2 weeks if everything goes as science would have it. So you may see if that works. Do we invite your questions at this time? And I may repeat the question if it's useful. So please, two microphones.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. I do have a question about your third point on physics. Is a case for hope and quantum physics. You said that there was a saying that you had memorized, and you gave it to us quite exactly. Everything we know in physics is... What is the rest of that? Could you fill in the blank?
Yes, I think I caught that. I think did I mention the scientist that I'm quoting, Henry Stapp, S-T-A-P-P, and his colleague who they think alike, Jeffrey Shu? The sentence reads this way: everything we now know in physics is in accord with the idea that the fundamental process of nature lies outside space, time, and matter.
I'd like you to comment on something that E.O. Wilson has written about, the sociobiologist at Harvard.
Right.
Who's one of his ideas in his last book, Consilience, is that there is a identifiable God spot in the brain.
That there is a
Identifiable God spot
A God
in the
spot
brain.
in the brain that when stimulated or overstimulated, people can become excessively religious. And one of his notions or hopes is that one day science will be able to more accurately pinpoint this area of the brain and remove it so that we will all become more rational and less emotional. And I just wonder what you think about those ideas and whether you think there's science behind that.
Time is short, I'll just tell you. I think it's nonsense. I take on E.O. Wilson in my forthcoming book, so you'll get a little more from then. But it's, of course, he is a sociobiologist, which is a reductionistic view of the good thing about the book is it does present a whole world view, and we need science. The scientific worldview has never been spelled out in as much detail as he has done, with extraordinary aplomb in applying the thesis he has. But I think that the reductionistic premise that comes down in the end, too, I didn't think of this, but I wouldn't have been above putting it in my book, that the thesis of E.O. Wilson is genes are us, with the R, spelled backward, like toys are us. And I do not think that reductionism accounts, because every new level, even in terms of the level of science, from quarks to particles and to atoms and molecules and so on, every new level introduces new laws which cannot be derived from the laws of the level below them. And I think that holds certainly when we get up into culture and art and into religion. I'm sorry to be dogmatic, but time is short. But if you want to give a rejoinder, if anything I've said by way of response is inaccurate, you may be more of a well, I'm no biologist at all.
I don't have a rejoinder. Just one other comment that he makes is that the notion of God is evolutionary, that it is a self-protection mechanism that has allowed us to survive, and the brain has created it and created a real sense of reality around it. But it's an evolutionary thing that's there for our survival. Some people have risen above it. E.O. Wilson, I guess, considers him one of them.
That's a philosophical position, and he is entitled to it, and it may be in 100, 200 years we'll be able to fill in gaps and so on to show that to be right. But I do not think that that is going to be the case.
your optimism is very impressive in a person of your experience and learning. What of religions, the religions themselves, as far as the darkness and the light go? Do you think the world's religions are together leading us towards light, or leading us towards darkness in the way they interrelate and practice their faiths now and in the foreseeable future?
Stay here. Do I think that the religions themselves are leading us towards the light? Is that the question? It's a very mixed bag, very mixed picture. The civil rights movement would not have succeeded without the solid support of the mainline churches. And as Robert Bella says, back a couple of decades ago, we would have had American troops in Guatemala and elsewhere in South America, working with the CIA, were it not for the opposition of the mainline churches. So there are good signs, but it's far from a clear picture. I think I just have to leave it at that.
Dr. Smith, I was wondering what your opinion might be on the question of whether religions can offer paths that aren't at war with one another while still remaining true to their own scriptures and basic theologies.
Can religions remain true to their own scriptures and ideologies and foundations and find ways not to be at war with one another but to be cooperative? Is that the question?
Absolutely.
When it comes to the worldview, the fundamental conviction about the nature of things, the big question, I do not think, I take my stand with the traditional religions on that. I don't see anything in modernity or postmodernity that tops that vision. But not everything in the traditions are wide, and two things particularly. Their view of the physical world has been permanently retired by modern science, and their social teaching, they pretty much picked up the mores of their time. I'm speaking of slavery, caste, gender relations, and the like. So again, I don't go fumbling through the Bible or the Bhagavad Gita or Upanishad on social guideline. I think our postmodern period and what I said about pushing the fairness revolution out retires those institutional aspects. So it's a mixed picture. We need to winnow the wheat from the chaff, and the wheat that I am most invested in from my studies is, as I say, the big picture which posits a transcendent reality, call it God, Allah, Brahman, or whatever, that exceeds in power and in goodness this world that we experience. That, I think, is truer than any other worldview that has come along. And that, I think, if we could hew to that and then bring these other two aspects of human life in line with science for our understanding of the physical world and the fairness revolution for the social arrangements of life, then we would have passed a strainer through our history to lift out the best and let the rest sink back into the sand of history.
Thank you.
According to my watch, I think we have time for one final question.
Sir, you have, seemed to me, left out the ultimate, which we concern ourselves with in finding the light in the tunnel, and that is the social order or disorder, such as wars, nations, states, atomic powers, and etc. So how do you fuse in these issues that we see and perceive as being quite involved in our life and worldview into your tunnel and light of the tunnel?
I'll try. Given our the warfare that we live in and the conflict that we live in our society and our world, how do we reconcile that with the eternal end of our life and with the light at the end of the tunnel that you have hope for? Is that close?
Good.
No, I still
Okay.
don't. Okay, we have a tumultuous world, scary in many ways, that's true. And take it from there. What am I doing now?
Is there still light at the end of the tunnel given the conflict that we live in? Is that?
Well, I'm neither a prophet nor the son of a prophet, and so this calls for prediction, and I do not know. Maybe the global warming and other things. Maybe this planet will be uninhabitable in 100 years. So one hopes not, and we give our energy to causing the light to increase. But as far as prediction, I do not have the talent to say more than that.
Well, I think that, Dr. Smith, you've inspired many of us to wait eagerly for the publication of your book, and I, for one, will be very happy to rush right out and get it so that I can understand more of what you've said tonight. We thank you again very much.
You're welcome.